Hi people, welcome to Blue UK Jazz Dance. One of the key things is celebrating Black History Month, and culture is important to me as a person. And what happened was I made a decision that Black History Month has to be 12 months of the year, because I live my life as an African dancer person in Britain 12 months of the year. And what happened is there's a need to address the balance of the lack of opportunities for me to share Black history and culture. We can't have it just in 1 month, because our culture is basically scattered across the country. To understand it in a comprehensive way, we need to have a 12 months a year program. And I introduced that as an individual, and I introduced that Black culture has changed. Basically, not only US history, it's changed West Indian history, it's changed the world history. Black culture, when you have Black History Month, they're the missing pages of history, and it's important people understand that. I was an individual who very much took on what is called the Schoenberg Museum. The leader of it, called Schoenberg, he talked to people in Black History Month. He was saying, what's important, there's been misrepresentation of history. And when you have Black History Month, people think it's contained into Black history. It isn't. Black History Month is the missing pages of Black history, because we came first before any other culture. And we had great African kingdoms before any other culture. Our culture spread cultures, arts to other cultures. And what we've been given an impression that Western man came first, boom, and the Western woman came first, and we followed them. We never did that. It's historically known as a fact. And so it's the missing pages of history. And why did the pages missing is obviously the first question that needs to be identified. And I want to talk about what has to happen is that basically people of wider cultures are unaware to African diaspora people's icons that we had. Yeah. So one of the key things I talk about jazz is one of the biggest things. You have to have a focus for what you want to do, and jazz is one of my focuses. Talking about the journey of icons, how they learned to play jazz, how they learned to sing, and their success stories from struggle to success is what you have to look at when you look at jazz. But at the same time, not to glamorize things, look at the journey of the icons, look at the journeys of heroes and sheroes in our history, which is important as an individual, and not glamorize. Many people went through struggle. Some people went through struggle to success, but that success meant the death of them as an individual. And it's important to people to understand some of our heroes and sheroes were people who ended up dead fighting for us. So Martin Luther King is important, Malcolm X, Medgar Evans, many people died in our heroes and sheroes, and it's important to recognize what did their death stand for, because we've lost that. And we've come, what happened in society, we can come self-centered, and or you can come to a point where you don't want to look at anything in the society at large because it's too traumatic. We have to stop that. We have to be real in the world that we live. You have to know the journey of race relationship in this world. We're living in a new period where leaders are coming through and cultural diversity is around. Well, for us to have diversity, you have to have people who understand how race relationships came. And so they become protectors of it and always constantly redressing the lack of diversity and the lack of equality in the society at large. Because what happened with a whole 400 years where we've had nothing but miseducation, misrepresentation of our culture in the world, and 100 years of colonialization. And post-colonization today, we still have misinformation taking place. We need dreamers. People came in this world and they dreamt, and they pushed the boundaries of the learning with the dreams, and they've created their own institutions. And part of their work was all African diaspora people. What did they do? Because they were treated in an undignified way and projected to the world through the creative country industries, through books, through songs, theatre, etc. Example, the Black and White Minstrel Show in the UK from 1830 to 1987 in the theatre, shaping people's minds about African diaspora people. You need dreamers to challenge the stereotypes. Individuals are going to stand up and do works, just do studying, to do research. They go around the world doing talks, doing presentations. Catherine Dunham was one of these women that she decided she's going to do talks. She's going to go around the world and challenge people, and she did talks. And it's important for people to understand that you have to be a dreamer. Dreamers who challenge the system socially, physically, intellectually, culturally, emotionally, spiritually, politically, economically, technologically, environmentally, and legally. There's people did that because they understood the significance of how social development impacted on people's society. Think about it when you think about blacks in this world. or how we think about them. We say, oh, they love to dance, sing, laugh, and, you know, act. And it's actually portrayed as a stereotype. We're stigmatized socially. But what happens is the dreamers understood, like me, we have to challenge them stereotypes. What does dancing do for you scientifically? What does drumming do for you scientifically? What does storytelling do for you scientifically? What does comedy, laughing do for you scientifically? It improves your health. Did we understand that African dance with people? Yes. Good. Then share that to the world and don't apologize. Because people try to stigmatize us as being a people more than any of the people that we laugh, sing and joke. We don't. I live in Britain as an individual. I'm less than 1% of the population. So where did that stereotype, look at people love to dance, sing and stigmatization of it come? What happened? Some people feel bad about it. I don't, because I tell people, we do like to laugh. We do like to sing. We do like to tell stories. We do like to play music. It's not because we're lazy. It's because we use it for our health. And part of our culture, basically, integral to our culture is music, all the elements that you just presented. And UK jazz dance is important for me to share with people black history and the individual that studied inspirational figures. All of us in this room are inspired by people. We live a life where we know the legacies of people that influence us, and we actually follow, some people follow archetypal, we follow the paths that other people have taken. Now as an individual, I took a different path into dance. I never thought I'd be a dancer professionally. Boom. Dance broadened my horizons, how you could use dance. And I think that's happened for a lot of artists. They realised that they would have a lot of influence in using their dance in different ways. And they did that through being dreamers, which is important. We need inspirational people, people who influence people, because they're the ones who generally have the ear of the people. People who broaden people's horizons. I've been one of them individuals. And Black History Month is about that whole element and sharing with people. But it's one of the things that talks about change makers, individuals who are involved in policy. There's people, there's a number of our academics who have gone on to do academic study, gone into academic institutions and challenged students academically. I'm one of them individuals that did that a few times, particularly did in 89-91. I challenged people in Bedfordshire Higher Education College. They knew nothing about black dancers, and I thought that was unacceptable because I was there. They were educators, people who taught dance in educational institutions, of people who did sports, taught sports, and had nothing. They had no knowledge on black sports, legacy of black sportsmen and women, and black dancers, males and females, and that's companies. And I thought that was unacceptable to me as an individual. We had dancers, change makers who travelled up and down the country, themselves independently learning dance. People travelled internationally. I was one of them individuals that did that, sharing tapes and sharing dances. The great thing about dance, people love to dance and people love to share. And I became an opportunity to be a change maker in sense of youth arts cultural exchanges. I introduced my dance to them and talked about my dance has a social, physical, intellectual, cultural, spiritual side to it, my urban dance. And they were shocked by that. I said, well, if you know the heritage, you'll understand why there's a spiritual side. You understand there's a social development side. And because people had stereotypes and I brought information, one of the key things of change makers, I created my own resources for schools, for private schools and for institutions to get a deeper understanding of my culture. They can't get that understanding unless I do that myself, because the information's scattered, because it's underground. So change makers is very important in one's culture. Institutions, one is celebrating diversity. One of the key individuals, I created my own institution. I'm an institution of one. And why? Because you can be an institution of one, gather your material, function like that, have a core mission. My core mission was to promote the positive images and energy of my African culture, heritage, arts and wider uses. And its wider uses for communication skills, for life skills development, for team building, for issue-based work. One of the key things I'm a specialist in is using my art for issue-based work. So jazz, race relations, you can talk about that. Talk about collaborative working, cooperative working, competition, talking about business, talking about architecture, because jazz came through a certain era, arts had changed, talking about arts, culture, business, innovation, improvisation, healthcare, self-empowerment, self-help, self-reliance. All these things were I shared through issue-based works, and one of the things being an institution of one as an individual. One of the things I share with people is important as a person doing Black History Month, but to help to preserve and share stories is important. So our individual, I started to preserve stories and share stories of UK jazz dancers, particularly from '86, because that material was there before we didn't have that material. But from '86, I talk about Absolute Beginners, the key film that actually destroyed any positive image of us. And what happened was we were looking for that to open doors for dancers who didn't have to go to dance schools, but were UK jazz dancers, to get a door into the film industry, into the theatre industry, because the film had 3 dance groups that self-taught themselves. They never went to dance schools or whatever as an individual for them to learn the dance. That opened a door for people to get into the dance industry without going to dance schools. But that was killed by the film Absolute Beginners. Stories that are overlooked is very, very important in the context of Black History Month. And as a Black history champion and advocate, I talk a lot about stories overlooked. And the number one story I talked about, stories being overlooked, is my own story as a dancer. Is one of the key things I look at as a dreamer, because I was the individual who is, I didn't know it at the time. I realized when I started to do some reflective practice work and do some legacy writing, legacy of leadership writing, I'm the longest dancer in Manchester ever in the history of UK jazz dance, representing the dance styles, still travelling up and down the country and outside the country to share my culture with others, coming from a heritage background, coming from a legacy background, and most importantly talking about, do you know that I use my work in multicultural work and I use it in Black History Month to empower my community. A few dancers do that. I mean, under that umbrella, and then I use my dance in wider ways with other. I will use it for other organisations. But one of the key things was from perspective, I identified to people UK jazz dance, blue UK jazz is my own culture. I have my own lifestyle and movements. And when you have a culture, there's many things embodied in the own language, own art, own music. And what happened, I recognized that what happened, each dancer, pioneer dancer, had their own culture, and it's for them to present their aims and objectives, what they see for themselves as dancers. And one of the key things is I've come back talking about the guide to going pro. I've come back after I've been to university to gain arts management, administration and business management skills to promote some of the projects I've ever done and to promote my sort of projects. I want to raise people's comprehensive understanding that this art form is bigger than dance. It's a culture, it's an art form, it's a lifestyle, and I created my own art form, my own lifestyle, my own culture. I have my own legacy of leadership. And what happened when I went to university, I went there to underpin my vocational work knowledge by analytical knowledge and analytical thinking, so I could give people a comprehension inside what it takes to go to be pro. Basically, respect for others, but most importantly, respect for yourself, commitment to yourself, commitment and responsibility, integrity to going pro. And that for me is redressing the lack of Black History Month opportunities, lack of heritage, lack of legacy work, and lack of talking about your own legacy, which is important, because when you go forward as a dancer, important to know a dancer must inspire and influence. A leader in dance must inspire and influence people and have the ear of individuals, and that comes by an individual making sure they've tell people their story, their legacy of leadership, so you have people's ear. Now, one of the key things, what happens being a professional, is what is professional behaviour. Part of the work I went back to university was to write my own program, what it is to have professional behaviour, what's responsibility, integrity, coming from a cultural perspective, because my art is my culture. You understand that, right? And what happened, what's the professional behaviour that you need as a person from coaching dance or teaching dance as a leader from your cultural perspective? Commitment to quality, commitment beyond yourself. Now, one of the key things that I love about this whole element of commitment to beyond yourself is basically we in our culture, grassroots communities, the Black community, we've taught to pass on your knowledge, experience and skills to the next generation coming up. And one of my legacies of leadership, everything I've done in my life has always been as an individual, as a pro. I've always come back into my community to share with. I always create resources, I always create programs to pass on my knowledge to the next generation of young people going up. Because dance is more than dance in our community. It's part of our health. It's our health solution. It's our career employability solution. It's our way to prevent stress not going to chronic stress. So one of the key things I talk about today a lot, the guide to going pro, you have to have stress prevention programs into place. Because what's happening, we're going to a point in our lives in society where more people are committing suicide more than anything before. The reason is, what happened is, we live in a self-centered world, and most people are not being genuine as before. So what happened is, some of the friendships that people are creating, they're not real. It's not real camaraderie. Do you understand? And our dance was created to develop real camaraderie. Our dance was developed communal behavior. But what's happening, the part of that's lost. So what's happening, people are involved in unhealthy environments, and partly people become sentimental. They're staying with people that abuse them. So we have a lot of children in the society right now who have been abandoned. And abandonment doesn't mean you have to have your parents abandon you. You can go through abandonment issues. So I'll give you some examples. In early learning, when the woman doesn't breastfeed the child can feel abandoned. That's what's happening at the moment, because modern life is no more breastfeeding is taking place. You take a bottle. People didn't know the science of breastfeeding. They didn't know the science of tying the baby to your back, because that's how the child was, to give the child security. Because the child smells the mother. When the child can't smell the mother, they weren't supposed to be in cots. So what happened was, Victorian education, child rearing, was the worst type of child rearing. They created generations of abandoned children. They were unaware to that fact. So there's no judgment, but that's how it was. See the child, don't hear the child. The child came up abandoned, and that has been sort of what's happened in the society at large. Do you understand? So the idea going pro, when I talk about dancing, I talk about the things I did with my son growing up, that my son slept in our bed. Do you understand? We made sure we were there to hug my son. I hugged my son 24/7. I put my son on my shoulders. The mum had him all the time. Do you understand? Them taught things close to him so he would feel secure in who he was. So the guide to going pro is that I use dance as a tool for what? For the benefit of early learning of people. That's one of the key things. I talked about dance, early learning dance education for myself and other people. I taught individuals, dance with your child. Early learning dance is important because it communicates to the child, this is the accepted appropriate behavior. So if you look into Cuba, you see the dancing, the child learns the appropriate behavior of dancing. The child has to be free-spirited in a society that tries to stop you to be free-spirited. So the first thing you must do in the early learning as a child, tell the child stories that are empowering. Tell the child stories that offer them wisdom. Teach the child quotes, that affirmations that empower them. Do you understand? Like my parents taught me, boom, don't let barriers stop you from achievement. So what happened, I learned in my life, I should learn to hurdle barriers using my creativity, my talent, and that's what I'm doing at the moment. Because I was a person who self-taught himself to dance. After my parents obviously gave me the first steps, after my uncle gave me the first steps, after my nanny got the steps, but I had to work out, develop steps to highly complex music, which was jazz. And that was part of my rites of passage to learn to problem solve some of my situations. And through dancing, dance gave me emotional intelligence, gave me the confidence, gave me the self-management, gave me the empathy for other people, gave me the self-empowerment. I knew when I danced, it did certain key things. Yeah? It made me more responsible and have integrity in myself. That's what dance did. It made me more committed. It made me respect others. Because to dance, as a dancer, when you're working with others, you have to respect them. And what happens, the different styles that you do. So if you do ballet, you do pas de deux, you're working with somebody, you lift them up. You have to be responsible for them. You have to respect them. Do you understand? There's a certain process of working with individuals when you're working together. I have to know about cooperative behavior, communal behavior. I have to know about positive competition. Some people engage in competition in a really bad way, in a negative way. I engage in competition. And the first competition I had was with myself in a positive way, because that's what we do. And I made markers, I made a rota to say, right, I want to get this done, I want to get that achieved, I want to get that achieved, I want to get that achieved, which was very important to me as a person. It's a guide to going pro. You must have markers, because you're not going to be here forever. So it's important that you have a plan. So the guide to going pro is that you must have a plan and some set deadlines and goals. Most important, you must have a core mission statement. So when people come to you, they know what you stand for. You have to know what you stand for. So when you go out, you consistently talk about what you stand for as an individual. Do you understand? And you know what a pro is. Because what happened is, when people come alongside you and work with you, I talk to people, being a pro is about having excellence. Being a pro means you're committed to other people. Being a pro, that means you have values. And I'm talking about positive values. And it's not one of being self-centered. That is what my art form taught me. That's what play taught me. And that's what my parents taught me. I don't live for myself. I live for my community. And I live for others. I live for my family. self-care is the #1 thing. The guide to going pro, you create a plan for your self-care first, and some people do not do that. Blue UK Jazz, that's out.